Before we begin, let me get the obvious disclaimer out of the way. This video will be discussing episodes 37 and 38 of Pokémon XY&Z, and more importantly, the outcome of the Kalos League Finals match between Ash and Alain. If you have not yet seen these episodes, this is your obligatory spoilers warning. Turn back now to go watch them if you don't want me to give it all away, and come back later to watch this video if you feel so inclined. This recording is being done prior to episode 39 or beyond, so if anything happens in future episodes to contradict anything I say here, that does not mean I'm not aware of it. I would appreciate not getting any comments assuming that I'm not informed when I am. If you're coming into this discussion having already watched my Kalos League theory video, then it's no surprise to you that, like many people on the internet, I was extremely hyped over the XY saga of the Pokémon anime, and I believed very strongly that Ash Ketchum had the potential to win the Kalos League, and more importantly, finally break his 20-year Pokémon League losing streak. However, as it turns out, he lost. Again. For the past week since this episode aired, the internet has been in an absolute uproar over this outcome, calling it everything from expected to blasphemous. And given the stance that I previously took ahead of time, it should come as a surprise to no one that I too was heavily disappointed. I was heartbroken, utterly heartbroken. In an irrational way, I felt betrayed. I just couldn't believe that despite all of this potential, all of this buildup, all of this spectacle and rallying everywhere, that I probably contributed to, admittedly, that absolutely none of it mattered in the moment of truth. The cycle could not be broken. Ash still could not win. This is going to be a pretty long video because there's a lot about this outcome that I want to discuss. I would appreciate it if you waited until it was done before commenting, although I know people will do so anyway. If you just want the nitty-gritty of my opinions on this subject instead of watching this whole thing, then allow me to summarize my thoughts right now so that you can stop watching as soon as possible and be on your merry way. I accept the outcome just as I said I would, even though I think the battle was absolute bullshit and littered with problems. I'm pissed off that all of this buildup and potential meant absolutely nothing in the end. I don't blame Alain or call hacks because he had his own potential that I probably underplayed to a degree. But none of that matters now because it's going to take quite a lot from this anime to convince me to watch next season, and even more so to ever convince me that any potential Ash has next time around is not just another empty promise. Be that as it may, I'm not going to let this one bad ending ruin my opinion of the XY seasons as a whole. I still enjoyed them, I still think they were well animated, well written, and I would recommend them to any Pokemon fan, despite the fact that I would now advise them to keep their expectations in check once they reach the finale. I don't forgive the writers for giving us a lousy ending, but I still appreciate the work they gave us up until now. Even so, I blame myself for getting so hyped up in the first place, and I hope to never let myself reach quite that state in reaction to this anime ever again. I think it's tragic that marketing always kills any potential for the show to become anything more than a glorified commercial. Fool me once, writers, shame on you. Fool me twice, fuck you, now you're just an asshole. Also, Amourshipping is as good as dead as far as I'm concerned. Thanks for watching. When I first finished watching this episode, I will not lie to you. I was pretty triggered. I was genuinely upset that all of my hopes and beliefs and wishing meant absolutely nothing, and I felt that making my original theory video was a complete waste of time. I was upset at myself for ever giving this anime another chance, and part of me wanted nothing to do with Pokemon ever again after this. It wasn't pretty. Let's just say that I think it was for the best that I didn't make this video until now. I took the time to vent, let my anger out, and cool down about it to an extent. Staying quiet about the subject until now has given me plenty of time to think, and I'm rather satisfied with how I look at things now. Whether or not you agree with my opinions on this matter is entirely up to you. First and foremost, I didn't like how this battle ended. I liked how it began in episode 37 as I felt both sides were pretty evenly matched. But then everything just sort of fell apart in the second act. But before we get into that, I feel the need to give credit where credit is due. Hawlucha and Talonflame fought admirably well in their respective battles, and even Noivern did what it could despite still not having as much battling experience as its teammates. I'm a little disappointed in Goodra's performance though. Given its previous triumphs, I expected it to be able to survive while taking out a weakened B-Sharp. I don't know if using Bide instead of Dragon Pulse would have saved Goodra from getting knocked out, but Dragon Pulse on its own clearly didn't. I was never under the impression that Goodra would beat Mega Charizard X, but I kinda expected it to stick around long enough to at least try. If there was any MVP for Ash's team though, I think it was definitely Pikachu. It took down Tyranitar, Metagross, and got a few really good hits in against Charizard. This was one of the best battles I've ever seen Pikachu fight in, and that's not something I think we should be overlooking. Even so, we all knew it was going to come down to Charizard versus Greninja at the very end. It was always going to end with Mega Charizard X versus Ash-Greninja, and unfortunately, I feel this is where everything fell apart. What was wrong with this fight, you ask? Let me count the ways. Number 1. Going into this battle, Greninja was at full health while Charizard had already sustained considerable damage from Pikachu's attacks earlier, and yet it was still somehow able to outlive Greninja entirely, as if this fact didn't matter in the slightest. Number 2. Prior to any transformations, Ash told Greninja to use Cut instead of a water-based attack against Charizard, even though not only would something like Water Shuriken have had the type advantage against a fire type like Charizard, it would have also had the added attack power boost from Goodra's Rain Dance just before it ended. Potentially, this one alternative attack could have done that much more damage that it could have ultimately changed the outcome of this entire fight, since Charizard would have been theoretically that much weaker after that point. Obviously, I have no way of confirming that if things had played out this way that Ash would have won, so don't you think for a second that I'm calling this a fact when it is nothing more than a hopeless theory from a heartbroken fan like me with nothing left other than a meaningless and probably desperate urge to speculate. I do know that the anime jumps around a lot between whether or not it wants to follow the game logic, especially with type advantage. So that makes this specific problem even worse because even if Ash had ordered Greninja to use Water Shuriken instead of Cut, the writing does not guarantee that the confrontation would have played out in Ash's favor, as it should have if my theory has any potential at all, and such inconsistency in this storytelling pisses me off even more. Number 3. While we're on the topic of the writing, allegedly the writers from the Black and White season were responsible for this episode. If this is true, then why? Why in God's name would you ever give these people a second chance at writing for this show after how badly they fucked up the Black and White seasons? Especially now in the league finals, which is a pinnacle point in the story when it was beyond critical for the writing to be at its best. Why would you ever take a risk at letting these people carry the story at this important moment? If they really wanted a second chance that badly, tell them to wait until production of the Alola adaptation begins, or even just put them in charge of whatever comes after the Team Flare crisis, if anything. But not right now in the middle of this climactic and heavily important battle. This was such a stupid decision. It would be like if I asked my neighbor to take my final exams for me, even though he would have absolutely no knowledge on the subject matter that I'm the one being graded on. This choice is so baffling that I can't help but feel it was done at the last minute or as part of an idiotic executive choice from one of the higher-ups who doesn't understand what was at stake with this episode in terms of ratings. The conspirator side of me wants to believe that they had an alternate ending planned where Ash actually did win, as ridiculous as I know that sounds, but someone forced the writers to swap it out for this garbage at the last minute instead. Number 4. This fight had all the makings of a typical shonen anime climax. Protagonist who believes in always getting stronger with evident growth and power to demonstrate said desire. Protagonist has lost to a rival several times in the past. Protagonist confronts said rival with new ultimate power to make a final comeback victory in the moment of truth. In any other typical anime, this would have been enough for the protagonist to finally win. But I guess Pokémon is too above that, because that wasn't enough to just let this poor fucking kid win one single goddamn match. Greninja possessed what I like to call the giant orange Rasen Shuriken plot device ripoff no jutsu, and even with that, it still wasn't enough for Ash to win. At this point, I legitimately want to ask the writers of this episode, by their logic and ignoring the obvious influence of marketing, what exactly it would have taken for Ash to win this fight, since clearly all of this power was still not enough. And more importantly, why Ash could not possess whatever the hell they would say it would take for Ash to win this match. But since I most likely will never get such questions answered, I'm forced to assume that the only reason The only reason Charizard survived a literal plot device of an attack is because it was wearing literal invisible marketing plot armor. And I guess as far as storytelling goes in anime, plot armor is something that can never ever be beaten no matter what. And that fucking blows. Number 5. Ash-Greninja can endure 2 Leaf Storms from a Mega Sceptile, but in the end it's a single Blast Burn. A Blast Burn from Charizard is all it takes to bring Greninja down. Bull fucking shit. This anime just continues to make up its own rules about type advantage, since this attack should not have been effective enough to finish Greninja off. And finally, number 6, once the dust had settled and all that was left was a silent stare down between the two combatants, there was a split-second moment where Charizard stumbled but did not fall. Right there. Right fucking there. That was the ultimate tease from these miserable writers. That was their middle finger to the fans. Charizard was just about to collapse and end this match the way so many of us had expected it to, but no. Charizard stumbled but did not faint, and Greninja fainted right after that. And then it was actually over. As far as I'm concerned, this ending was an absolute train wreck. The fight started off just fine, but even if it hadn't, it still could have been redeemed with a satisfying ending. Too bad we'll apparently never get a satisfying ending since Ash lost once again and will probably always lose at this point. Listen to me, getting all worked up over a kids show. It sounds pretty ridiculous, doesn't it? And you know what? It is. At the end of the day, it probably really is. But the way I interpret it, the reason this ending feels like such a cop-out, such a tease, such an absolute stab in the back to the fans, is because it completely destroys the validity of all the potential and confidence these past seasons have worked so hard to instill in the viewers. So much so to the point where I feel the need to ask, what was the point of any of this? Why make Ash's Greninja special at all? What was the purpose of giving it this hidden, unique power if in the end it still could not compete against Mega Evolution? I suppose it could be argued that the Ash-Greninja power only exists because in Olympia's prediction, they're destined to stop the Kalos disaster caused by Team Flare, not to simply win the Kalos League. But if that's the case, then riddle me this. Alain will most likely betray Team Flare when he finds out what they're really doing. But if he were to battle Ash again before coming to this realization, how am I supposed to believe Ash-Greninja would be able to beat Mega Charizard X now when it couldn't in the official match and literally nothing would have changed in the time between the real match and this hypothetical rematch? Going by the writer's logic, Greninja still wouldn't win, Ash and company couldn't stop Team Flare, and Kalos would be doomed. The end. I guess Ash and Greninja are going to have to hope Alain joins their side as soon as possible then. Furthermore, why was there so much emphasis and talk from Ash and just about every other main or supporting character about getting stronger and stronger and finally winning the league, more than any previous season from what I've noticed, if absolutely nothing has changed and the cycle of losing persists? Ash didn't keep his promise to that one trainer who couldn't get all the badges. He lost 2 in the end, so it's great to know that that was just a tease and a complete waste of time. Hell, I can't even listen to the opening theme now in quite the same way because all I can think of is, wow, what an incredible lie all of this was. It meant absolutely nothing in the end. If the XY and XY&Z seasons were an attempt from the Pokémon Company to apologize and make up for the travesty that was the black and white adaptation, then I'm just baffled at how they could royally fuck it up and make it all meaningless by bringing back the very writers who started this problem in the first place. And if I'm wrong and those writers didn't actually come back and the ones who wrote this episode were actually the same ones who have been writing all this time, even then I would have to ask, what the hell happened? How could they not see just how much this decision to make Ash lose goes against everything else they've established so far? But as angry as I am over the writing for this episode, I actually don't blame Alon at all, and I think a lot of people, myself included, kind of underestimated him and underplayed his potential. Alon is not the same plot device of a character as someone like Tobias, and I don't just mean besides the obvious fact that he doesn't use any legendary Pokemon. Alon's entire character arc has been about getting stronger and stronger as a trainer, just like Ash. His Charizard has been battling against Mega Evolved Pokemon since the introduction of Alon as a character in the Mega Evolution specials. It has lost before, but the feats it has accomplished are actually quite noteworthy, I feel. Alon's Mega Charizard X took on the trio of primal legendaries, Zygarde's 50% form, Ash-Greninja twice, and built a streak of 10 consecutive wins in a row against Mega Evolved Pokemon without fainting. When I look at all of that, it suddenly doesn't seem to be quite as much of a shock to me that it held its own against Ash-Greninja in the finals. I still don't agree with it winning in the end, but I do think it's a bit unfair to blame Charizard's win entirely on something like Gen 1 bias or plot armor, aside from surviving that plot device of a shuriken, of course. I still think that should have finished it off, but that's beside the point. I never hated Alon as a character, and I still don't after this. I always liked him as an older and more mature trainer than Ash, and I remember a time when I was feeling like I wanted an anime spin-off starring a trainer like him. I don't think it's fair for people to be calling him a cheater or anything like that. He earned his gym badges fair and square, and he was never cocky or arrogant about his own skills. Battling and growing stronger with more experience was just really important to him, and he was legitimately enjoying his battles with Ash all the way through as a good sport. He respects Ash as a rival and was determined to give this final match everything he had. I can understand people being frustrated about Ash losing at the very last minute, as I'm feeling the same way, and I don't like how the battle was written. Be that as it may, I don't think it's fair to blame Alon because he really did give it his all, and apparently the writers want to say that his all was just slightly more than Ash and Greninja could handle. That being said, I don't really see the significance of Alon winning in terms of plot progression. Why was this so important? Where does the anime go from here that is so significant that it was necessary for Alon to win in the eyes of the writers? To me, it just feels like Alon won by default, simply because Ash cannot ever win according to the writers. Like I said before, I think it's pretty safe to say that Alon will betray Team Flare once he finds out they've been using him this whole time, but that could still have easily been done the same way, even if he had lost to Ash. If getting stronger as a trainer is such an integral part of Alon's character, I personally feel it would have been even better storytelling for Ash to defeat him just to teach him that losing every once in a while is part of that process. It irks me that Ash never once defeated Alon, and despite the fact that Alon acknowledged Ash as a worthy opponent, he never had to get stronger by recovering from an extremely important loss the way Ash did and has always had to do in previous seasons of the anime up until now. The point I'm trying to make is that I don't think it's Alon's fault for how this turned out, or that he cheated, or anything like that. The way I look at it, it was just bad writing for the battle itself. If people still want to blame Alon and his OP Charizard, that's up to them, but that's not where I choose to place the blame. As much as I hate this league finale, I can't say that it ruined my opinion of the entire XY saga as a whole. I've said it a million times now, but I really do mean it when I express my love for these seasons. I really do love the animation and the development for characters like Clement, Serena, Sawyer, among others. And even if all this progress and talk about Ash winning the league was ultimately a lie and all for nothing, I really did enjoy all the hype with Ash-Greninja and all the momentum and growth they were showing. It really was fun while it lasted. It has been so many years since I cared about this anime that I previously grew up with, and it felt great to get back into watching the show again and seeing just how much it had changed for the better. The happiness I was feeling up until now was indescribable. The XY seasons rekindled an unbridled joy in me that I've missed having after all these years. It's been one hell of a ride, and I'll look back on this season with fond memories instead of just anger or disappointment. Even though this is a kid's cartoon, it's one that means a lot to me. It meant so much to me as a kid, and I was able to channel a familiar feeling of joy that nothing else has given me in quite the same way over the years. So, as silly as I have sounded in this video so far by getting so angry, it's just my passion showing. It really does hurt me a lot to see this character who has played a huge part in my childhood come so close to achieving a goal he's been chasing for so long, a goal that I had given up watching him pursue up until now. And just so we're clear, I'm referring to Ash's immediate goal of winning a league, not becoming a Pokemon Master, because to me, that's something different entirely that I'm going to delve into later. I was so close to seeing this aspect of my childhood come to an ending that I'd always dreamed of. I was so sure this was it, that my childhood was going to come full circle and that I could die happy one day knowing that, hey, at least Ash finally won a Pokemon League. But jokes aside, my history with this anime and my wonderful reunion with it are all the more reason why this conclusion really does hurt me so much. I just can't deny that I feel betrayed by all of this build-up and talk and anticipation. If the writers had been planning this outcome from the beginning, then I question what the point of all of this buildup actually was. Are they really just that mean-spirited that they enjoy messing with our expectations like this? Part of me wants to believe they aren't that cruel, but I don't know what else to think. I can only think badly of the writers unless they ever come out and justify all of this. And no, marketing does not do the job for me. Regardless, I would easily still recommend the XY seasons to any Pokemon fans who are looking for parts of the anime that were actually any good. Although now, I would tell them to keep their expectations in check when they reach the finale. Lord knows I should have. So after all has been said and done, do I regret making that Kalos League theory video? Well, the answer is yes and no. I do regret contributing to this conglomeration of high expectations and excitement because, in the end, I did set myself up for disappointment, as well as potentially anyone else who saw my video and believed in what I was saying. It's definitely hard for me to look back at that video now and not feel like it was a waste of my time and energy to make. But then again, I'd also say I don't regret making the video. If for no other reason, then, well, it was fun. I really was excited at the idea of Ash winning at the time when I was making the video. I believed in what I said. I was excited, and I could see that my feelings of optimism were inspiring other people to feel the same way. I think it's so much better when people come together to be optimistic rather than pessimistic. I thought it was pretty great how this season was bringing back so many people who had given up watching this anime years ago. It really felt like people were coming together as a community, and even better, we were there to root for Ash and to cheer him on, rather than to mock him like we usually did. Although, if anyone wants to go back to mocking him now, I really couldn't blame them. Besides that, it's not like I really had anything at stake here. I didn't bet any money or anything on Ash winning, so the fact that he lost really brings no immediate repercussions other than the broken hearts of fans who believed. I believed, but I was wrong. I can't change the way the battle played out, so all that's left for me to do is just move on. That being said, this entire experience has definitely taught me something about hype. It's kind of like a drug. It's easy to get sucked into it when everyone else is doing it, and the feeling it gives you really is great. But if you let hype take over your better judgment, it can create problems. Hype is very risky because although there is still a small chance that the subject in question will live up to the expectations, there is a much greater chance that it won't and will lead to disappointment, the magnitude of which depends on just how hyped you really were. For me, and probably many others, we were so convinced that Ash was going to win the league and that when he ultimately didn't, it was devastating. On the other hand, if I hadn't allowed myself to get so excited and so confident that he couldn't lose, maybe I wouldn't have felt as let down as I do now after I saw what happened. I don't know about anyone else, but this is something I definitely want to improve about myself. I'm just as guilty as anyone else is of getting sucked into hype over something I'm interested in and letting it consume me to the point where my expectations are so ridiculously high that there was no way that the subject matter was going to live up to it. It hurts to feel this much disappointment, even more when I remember that I brought this upon myself, and even more still when I realize that I could have prevented it, but didn't. I think it's great to get excited about things such as video games, movies, or even events, or whatever you're passionate about. But I need to learn to keep myself more grounded and allow more room for flaws or areas of disappointment. That doesn't mean that we should hope that products aren't the best they can be, but I think we do need to remember that most of the time, the products or subject matter that we're excited about are created by humans, who are naturally flawed creatures and will always be susceptible to making mistakes. So I guess you could say I do regret letting myself become so convinced that Ash could win and contributing to instilling that mentality in others. It's not a mistake I want to repeat so easily next time around. However, while I do think people who believed Ash would win and were disappointed, like me, should take the time to reflect on themselves and determine if maybe they too had their expectations a little too high, I do not think that makes it okay for other people who didn't believe to rub it in our faces. And sadly, I've been seeing a lot of that this past week. I've been seeing a lot of comments on several different forums of people rubbing in the fact that people like me were wrong, they were right, and in some extreme cases that we were delusional or stupid to ever think Ash had a chance at winning. And it's unfortunately why I felt I had to disable the comments on my Kalos League theory video. People were using the comment section as an outlet to attack people who were hopeful, just so they could feel better about themselves, I guess. Kicking others while they're down? Come on, guys, I know at least some of you have to be better than that. If betting on whether or not Ash would win the Kalos League was a sport in and of itself, Why can't we be more sportsmanlike about it? What do the people who were right get out of saying they were right other than, well, bragging rights? But if you're bragging about the protagonist losing, is that really such a victory that requires this much vocal celebration? There was a real sense of community before the outcome was revealed, so why can't we have it stick around now? Instead of telling someone, haha, you were wrong, I told you Ash was never going to win a league, you were stupid forever thinking he had a chance, why can't we say something like, tough break that he didn't win, but that's just how it goes sometimes? Why do people feel the need to put down the very people who were trying to be optimistic and bring some positivity to this community? The answer is probably something like the fact that this is the internet where everyone is anonymous and can say whatever they want to anyone without consequences, regardless of whether or not they're actually that much of a dick in real life. I think it's really kind of sad how much Ash's loss has brought this whole community down. The people who were hopeful are disappointed and now have a bleak outlook on the anime's future, and the trolls and generally rude and nasty people are having a field day and tearing apart the community that was coming together over this. One of the most widely accepted beliefs I've seen as to why this anime is so repetitive and bare in nature is because marketing this franchise to children is the only reason it exists. I'm not going to try to dismantle this argument, so please don't misunderstand me here. How could I? Marketing is pretty much the only logical reason we have right now to explain why Ash has always lost in the leagues, why he lost here in Kalos, and why he will probably always lose in the future. I'm well aware that Pokemon originated as a video game and that the anime primarily exists to advertise said games today. However, I don't believe that marketing should excuse this anime from criticism or that it should deny this anime from ever becoming something more wholesome than that. As long as the Pokemon, the region, the new characters, and new prominent features are present in the anime adaptation of a generation, it gets the advertising part done just fine, so I don't understand why it can't do more than that. I don't see why it can't have a more engaging or interesting story that uses these elements that are being showcased in new or exciting ways. Half of the reason I loved Ash-Greninja so much was because it was something that wasn't from the games, and only the anime could explain to us why it existed or what it could do. It felt to me that this time around, the writers were really trying to branch out and make this an anime that could be legitimately enjoyed as a standalone product rather than a glorified commercial. But when Ash-Greninja lost, it felt like that was marketing stepping in and crushing any chance of this show ever becoming something more, and that absolutely frustrates me. I've never liked that stereotype that it's a cartoon and cartoons are only for kids, because as we've seen time and time again, that simply isn't true. Whether you want to look at the fact that not all anime is geared towards children and some have their fair share of mature themes, or even cartoons in the West have always been experimenting and exploring new ways to make their characters and stories even more fleshed out, even though kids are the primary demographic. Avatar was a show meant for children, but that didn't stop it from telling a rich story with realistic characters who shared differing beliefs and philosophies about power and the state of the world. The overwhelming success of Pokemon Go should stand as an indication that Pokemon is now appealing to far more people than just kids. Teens and adults are getting sucked back into obsessing over this franchise again, especially the ones who probably grew up with Pokemon back in the 90s when it was in its prime. We're seeing a rebirth of Pokemon as a popular franchise and a widely marketable property, and if the Pokemon Company wants these older demographics to get invested in the anime as well, it really would not hurt for them to change the anime around a bit to provide something more wholesome since people have grown up and are looking for just a little bit more in their animated entertainment. At this point, I feel like Ash is one of the biggest factors holding this anime back from ever becoming anything more. If the writers are too afraid or simply refuse to let Ash's character evolve beyond one dimension with something as small as a single league victory, then once again I propose that it might be time for him to retire as the lead protagonist of the show and bring in some fresh blood. I thought the Kalos League would be a pretty great way for him to bow out gracefully, but now I just think it would be best for him to spare us any further annoyance or potential disappointment. And for anyone who says they can't get rid of Ash just because of Pikachu being the mascot, they could easily give the new protagonist his or her own Pikachu, since the anime has demonstrated that Ash's Pikachu is not the only one in existence. But why are the writers so afraid of the idea of Ash ever winning a league? Well, let's talk about that for a little bit. I never understood why it's so impossible and forbidden for Ash to ever win a league. Ash wants to become a Pokemon Master. We've known this since day one. But the problem, to me anyway, is that this is such a vague and non-specific title that I don't understand how it can possibly translate into one league win. How does winning one single Pokemon League in one single region automatically mean Ash would become a Pokemon Master? I don't know about anyone else, but to me, becoming a master of something is a pretty tall order. To me, a master is someone who has seen, done, learned, and perfected just about everything there is in a certain activity or skill. Or at the very least, that person has attained a level of proficiency beyond that of most people. It sounds like something that would take years upon years of practice and training to attain, ignoring the fact that humans are naturally flawed creatures and will probably always run the risk of making mistakes no matter how good at something they get. In the context of the Pokemon anime, I would think it means that Ash would have to go back and win the league in all 6 previous regions first, take down each one's Elite Four, as well as the champions themselves before Ash could ever call himself anything close to a Pokemon Master. But that's just my interpretation of what a Pokemon Master could mean. It's not fact, and unless the Pokemon Company comes out and gives an actual definition for what it means, this will probably always be up for interpretation. But I'm in the camp that if Ash wins a league, that's only a step closer towards his dream. A pretty big one at that, but it's still just a single step. It would only get harder from there. Maybe that's why the writers don't ever want him to win. Winning a league would give Ash character development and growth. It would introduce a permanent change in his character that the writers could not ignore and would have to base future writing of his character around. They could no longer portray Ash as a rookie trainer, even though after 20 years I think he's attained enough battling experience that calling him a beginner this late in the game is absurd, and reset his progress just as they've done with every new region. Ash winning a league would mean progress, and that his character could only go up from there. This in turn means that the anime could change in story structure even just to a certain extent. Then again, I don't see why they couldn't just ignore Ash winning the Kalos League and reset him anyway since he won the Orange Islands League and Battle Frontier, but they've pretty much erased all traces of any of that. Hell, they could have reset Ash's character for Alola after he won the Kalos League, and I wouldn't really even have cared that much to be honest. I don't know if the writers just have no ideas for how they would write Ash's character after that if he ever won a league, or if they're just that lazy and hate the very idea of having to do more than just basic storytelling. If either of those are true, then I'm sorry, but fire these guys and find people who would be up to the task. And don't give me that, if Ash won a league, the show would end. No, it would not. I believe the show will end the day Ash officially earns the title of Pokemon Master, but winning one measly Pokemon League would be nowhere near special enough for him to earn that. Not when he'd still have 5 other regions he's still lost in, as well as the fact that Ash has never won against the Elite Four or any of the champions. He can't be a master if there are so many other trainers out there who are currently better than him. But regardless of that, the show does not need Ash to survive. Give us a new protagonist with a Pikachu, and start from scratch if that's what it takes. There is still potential for this anime to continue, but also do it in a more refreshing, interesting, or meaningful way. Obviously, the anime has no interest in trying to really change anything at this point though. To the people who think it's foolish for anyone to ever believe Ash will ever become a Pokemon Master, I think we want to see him just win a league more than anything else, just because it's been 20 goddamn years, and we'd like for this running joke to end. Or at least I would anyway. I don't care if he ever becomes a Master, because without a concrete definition of what a Pokemon Master is, that's a title that is unobtainable for Ash no matter how many times he wins or loses. Screw becoming a Master, can he just win one league? That's all I want at this point. If Ash couldn't win the Kalos League because of the writers and their stubborn refusal to ever break any new real ground with the show at all, I currently don't see any reason to still believe there's a chance that Ash will end up with Serena in any meaningful way in the end. Why should he now? His journey's not over yet, so there's no way Ash would want to pursue a relationship at this point. Besides, the writers will probably just continue to portray him as an oblivious child, incapable of recognizing Serena's feelings in the slightest, and in turn, effectively invalidate all of that teasing and pushing of Serena's crush that has been done up until now. Why the writers suddenly feel like blatantly undoing some of their own writing from these past few seasons is beyond me. I'm cringing at the very idea of how hard Ash is probably going to friendzone Serena when they eventually part ways. Regardless of whether or not Serena actually tells Ash the truth, he probably either won't understand what she means, or just blow her off entirely by saying that training and pursuing his dream is more important to him than anything else, and that he only thinks of Serena as a good friend. It would probably break a lot of fans' hearts, but the writers have done plenty of that already by making Ash lose the league, so why would they ever want to stop there? Unfortunately, I could just as easily see Serena ultimately not telling Ash how she feels and choosing to probably never tell him, because doing so would mean that the story would do something it's never done before, and Lord knows that's too much for the writers to deem worthy of trying. They'll probably just keep Serena on a leash here in Kalos under the veil that she wants to call Palermo and start her training to become Kalos Queen all over again. I know I'm being overly pessimistic about this considering how much I pushed for Ash and Serena getting together, but can you really blame me for giving up on that at this point? Maybe I'm starting right now and trying to control my expectations out of fear of getting burned by the writing again. Obviously, the season isn't over yet, but as of right now, I'm not expecting anything noteworthy to come from Serena's crush. I certainly don't expect her to go with Ash to Alola either, because that would mean Ash wouldn't automatically get a new female lead. That would be different writing, and according to the writers, different is bad and safe yet repetitive is good. So if Ash didn't win the league, and he probably won't get together with Serena after all, is there really any reason to be excited for the eventual Alola adaptation? There was a time when I thought so, but now I'm not so sure. Apparently, Alola doesn't even have an actual Pokemon League, so what Ash is going to do over there instead of earning gym badges is beyond me. But this entire Kalos ordeal has honestly burned me out to the point where I don't know if I even really care. I have no faith that any noticeable changes in writing or structure in the show that just so happen to surface in Alola are going to be permanent or do anything to change the ending, since I refuse to be burned again. Maybe it's a bit selfish and butthurt of me, but at this point, I don't think the writers could ever do enough to convince me again that the Pokemon anime will ever grow up in a sense. I think it would require a lot of change on their parts, change that I believe the Kalos League has solidified that they are not willing to make. If nothing else, I feel it would be courteous of me to apologize to anyone out there whom I convinced Ash was going to win the Kalos League. Deceiving or getting anyone's hopes up with my original video was never my intention. I blame myself for letting my own expectations skyrocket the way they did, but I can't help but feel burned by the writers, regardless of whether or not that was intentional on their part. Ultimately, I guess marketing meant that nothing about this show could ever truly change, and even though some people were right in claiming this, I don't really see how that's something to be excited about. The Pokemon anime is something that meant a lot to me as a kid, and it's heartbreaking to me now, seeing that this show just can't grow up with me, even if it is just in little ways. I don't think the entire fight of Ash vs. Alain was all that bad, but almost nothing about the matchup between Charizard and Greninja made sense to me. I found so many personal gripes with it that I can't help myself but be suspicious that something isn't right here. I could very well be wrong, but I would love to believe that Ash was actually going to win this time, but something happened within the company, and a change was forced to give us the ending we ultimately got. Regardless, it's not something I plan to lose sleep over. Moving forward, I'm probably going to view the XY and XY&Z seasons as if they were frozen in time, or a dream. I know it sounds silly, but I think I'll continue to enjoy these episodes and see them as a kind of what could have been scenario. If Ash could be free of these writers and their excuses for why he can't ever grow as a character. I hope people who haven't watched these seasons will still give them a chance, as I do still ultimately believe they're a good time to watch. But I do hope now that people won't get their expectations up about Ash winning the way I did. Maybe they'll even be able to enjoy the fight in its entirety and won't find the same problems I saw with it. I know the XY&Z season isn't over, but for me, it pretty much feels like it should be. Oh well, it was pretty damn fun while it lasted.